Hello everyone, and thanks for coming back to the channel. Today we're going to take a look at the FlyEgg130. Featuring 1105 7000 kV motors, 2.8 inch props, 10 amp 4-in-1 ESC, F3 flight controller, 800 TV line camera, 16 channel VTX. Mine has an FrSky XM receiver, a 2S balance lead connector for your battery. It also comes with an extra set of props, 4 prop guards and prop guard screws, motor protectors and screws for those, a USB cable, 2 extra battery rubber bands, a prop remover, a VTX channel map, FrSky XM instruction sheets, a manual, and a clear box. Comes with a typical 350 milliamp 2S35C rated battery. It weighs 20.4 grams. The vehicle weighs 79.8 grams. It does appear to be 130 millimeters. This vehicle is running Betaflight 3.1.6. So you may have noticed on the screen that I put that I was running 3S with mods. So I didn't include any flight footage with the stock battery. I think the stock battery is pretty poor. It will get you in the air. If you're just starting out and you can learn to fly, you're probably going to be hearing the beeper quite often. But that's one of the nice things about this vehicle is they did include a beeper. So we don't necessarily need an OSD, although I do like those OSDs. This one is a bit peculiar. You can see I've added some electrical tape to hold these wires down. I found that when you pulled on them, they would come up high enough to where they could possibly get in the props. I didn't want that happening. You can see a little bit in the video the difficulties with CMOS cameras, and you get a shot of how this one handles light. And it's not unusual for CMOS cameras to handle light like that. I just don't think this one is particularly good, but that is what we have to deal with CMOS cameras, and why we're seeing more come with the MicroSwift or other micro CCD cameras. Running the motors on 3S seems to be fine. I didn't have any problems. The ESCs and motors handled that just quite well. I really like these props. They're very hardy, and when I have a crash, and you saw one there, when I did fly that one back and it was vibrating all to boot, but just had a prop bent down. I bent it back out and it's still on here today. You can see they're kind of chopped up because of all my crashes, but that's not unusual for me. I did relocate the receiver. It's, as you might have noticed on other models from King Kong, they tend to mount them down here in this little void, which is okay. It's just not something I'm comfortable with, so I moved it. Something else you can notice is that the flight controller, the stack, is only mounted with 2 screws, and we get a little bit of play in here because it is soft mounted right down here and in the other corner, so we get a little movement here. You also see I added an XT30, and I added thicker gauge wire. I don't know if they're all coming like this, but you know, mine came with this balance lead, and this is like 26 gauge wire. It's tiny. I think if I could get a magnifying glass to focus, you could probably see that print right there. I could barely see it, but I do believe that says 26. that's just not going to hold mustard. So yeah, I don't know if I got one from the back of the shelf or what, but if you get one of these and it's got this connector on it, I would immediately switch it out for some heavier gauge wire and probably an XT30. You may have already noticed as I swung it around, I added a 5-volt regulator. And the reason why I did that is when I was flying it, whether the battery was on a full pack or not, you would see these... I'm hesitant to call them a fail-safe because it doesn't fall out of the air, but what you do see is that you see the machine kind of lock into place and you lose control on the sticks for a moment. Whether that moment is a second or two, I don't know. I can't really measure it, but it feels like an eternity, especially if you're flying towards anything immovable like a tree in my backyard. And adding the XT30 didn't get rid of that. Adding thicker gauge wire didn't get rid of that. So what I did was I just put a little Pololu over here, and I wired my receiver to that. And that took care of the problem. You may have different experiences. Maybe you have some super high octane batteries that can handle it. Maybe yours comes with a JST and it works just fine. This is just my experience. I was initially a little bit concerned about this aluminum. They've found some ways to making this aluminum pretty robust. I'm not sure which aluminum this is. Oftentimes in the hobby we're seeing it, what is it, the 7076 aluminum, which is supposed to be super hard. But it held up to all the thrashings I put it through. I didn't fall from a real high altitude, but I did have a lot of crashes where I smacked into stuff. One of the things when I do punch outs at that end of the yard and I start flying down, if it's real bright, I can't really see between the trees, and so sometimes I end up smacking them, and some of those crashes sounded pretty terrible, but you know, here we are. I'm proud to say that they've got either good quality carbon and or a nice cut and the proper thickness, so we don't end up with a broken frame, which is a big deal. The motors do get a tad bit warm, but they're not uncomfortable to touch. You can get your fingers on them and hold them on there for a moment, and that's kind of where we're at when we're trying to push these motors to 3S, is how hot is too hot. And I don't really know, but one rule I go by is if I can't put my fingers on it and hold it there for at least a moment or two, that's probably too hot. And if it's too hot, we've probably got too much prop on too little motor, and we probably need to look at remedying that one way or another. You can also see I've got a little bit of glue here on the sides, and that was because the camera, when it came, was pretty loose and just kind of jiggling around in the housing. I've also added some glue right back here to secure the camera into that little I don't know what kind of bracket this is. Whatever this material is, I added some glue all the way around to really firm things up. I had to redo this a couple times because when I'd crash, you know, the hot glue comes loose. You may want to do something else with that. You know, you can do some foam tape and squeeze it in there, or if you have some little rubber grommets or O-rings, you can probably put those in there and that would work just as well. But getting in there is a little bit of a pain because you have to remove at least one of the side plates. So you've got the 3 gold screws, and then you've got this little screw on your LED, and then you flip it over and you've got 2 more to get out so that you can pull a side plate off and you can get to the camera. But like I said, those side plates offered good protection, and that's oftentimes what we're looking for. We don't want our electronics getting busted up. The LEDs, I don't really fly with anyone, so that's not a big deal for me, but if you're looking for LEDs, it does have them, and they do work. They also change colors, so they're programmed. The stock PIDs, again, were a little bit odd to me, but they'll get you in the air, and it'll fly okay. It just didn't respond the way I wanted it to respond when I was flying it, so I went ahead and tweaked the PIDs, and you may choose to do that. You know, PIDs are kind of personal. One thing I haven't done is I haven't resecured my battery lead down here. That'd be a good idea, so if your battery eject, it's not pulling the pads right off your ESC. That's always a danger, and I just forgot to do that. As far as the batteries go that I was flying, I'll grab a few of those. So these are the batteries that I flew, and you'll recognize some of them. Some of them you might have some questions about. This has obviously been modified. I put on a lead for this one. This is a relatively new battery. I haven't had a lot of packs through this, but I did fly it. Probably, I would say, I've got 4 of these. I probably flew about, I'd say, at least 3 times on each pack, and they seem to hold up fairly well, but I'm not really convinced they're a good battery. I recently, in a video, I talked about the 2S version. Sometimes when they change, they can fall off. If you have a good 2S battery, the same manufacturer might not necessarily have a good 3S battery. This battery also comes in a gray and black version. I don't find them to be all that good. I prefer this one. We do have some extra weight with this battery because we have 2 leads. That can be kind of handy, though. But something to keep in mind. These batteries are kind of expensive. They flew fine, but I don't think they warrant the extra cost. I think I got these batteries from Buddy RC maybe 6 months ago, and it's very comparable between the two. On hard punch outs, you will hear the beeper on this one before you will this one, but it's not by much. This is a ready-made RC battery, and it originally came with an XT60. You can see it's 60 rated. Take that for what it's worth. And it flew just fine. It flew very comparable to, I would say, these two. And then lastly, we have a Tattoo battery. Now this one's a 650, so it's substantially larger than the other 450s and only slightly larger than the 550. But I felt this one it felt heavy in the air. And I felt like I was being slung into the corner because we are bottom mounted with the battery. And so I actually didn't fly a lot with this battery because of that characteristic of flying. I just didn't feel like I could pull out of corners like I wanted to. And it probably just has to do with the pilot being more ready on the throttle. But again, I like to stay light with my batteries. I don't mind a sub 3-minute flight time. Enough about batteries. So if you're looking at this vehicle compared to, say, the King Kong version that's about the same size, I think you're better off with this one because the canopy on the King Kong doesn't offer you much protection, and we have the same props, although I do prefer the 1105 motors on the King Kong 110. This mounting system will allow you to give more camera tilt, and that's something that I'm looking for. So if you're okay with the mild camera tilt that comes on the 110, you'll probably be fine. But if you're looking for more camera tilt, this is going to be the way to go. I do think without the OSD, PID tuning on this one is a bit easier, and it's purely because we can get native access to the USB port. If you look back at the King Kong 110 review I did, I'll put a card to it right up here, I made a hole in my canopy in order to be able to get the USB connected and be able to do some more tuning. I think if you buy this vehicle, you should get a 5-volt regulator. That fixed things for me. There may be other solutions to it. But this is a Pololu, which can be kind of pricey. You might want to shop around and look at adding a 5-volt regulator. If you end up with camera brownouts to where you lose your image, you may want to wire your camera and VTX into the 5-volt rather than doing the receiver. Just kind of depends on what you end up finding. So if you're willing to do a little bit of your own work, I think this is a pretty good vehicle. I think it flies pretty well. I've mentioned the things that I really like about it, and you just have to choose, is it worth it to be able to do a little work on your own? Or do you want something that flies great right out of the box and you don't have to mod at all? If you have any comments or questions or suggestions, please leave those in the section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.